Right away around 1:30, I'm going to get us started with the introduction.
And Caleb, just before you leave.
Oh, you just froze up.
I hope that's,
there you go. There you go. You're back.
All right. Yeah. Hope that doesn't happen too much.
No, I hope not either, but that's all right. Well, here we go.
I can see Dr. Boris. Hello, Greg.
Hi, Gerry. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Get my real self up there in a moment.
All right, good, good. Well, I like the hat.
Thank you. There we go.
Ah, there you go. How are you? Look the same.
You too.
Yeah, hopefully not the worse for the wear, right?
Yeah, it's amazing how we're aging well.
Yeah, there you go. Well, it's good to see you, though.
Likewise. Thanks for doing this.
Not at all.
Sure.
I've said to you before that I consider myself a South Dakotan, but I don't have the accent. I still have the New Jersey accent. So
but you still have the pheasant in your office.
There you go. That's right. That's right. Oh, that's funny. And Greg, I know when we finish up, and I know we'll have until 3:30 your time, I think. So I'll probably quickly jump off, but hopefully we'll connect me, you, and Kayla at some point. But again, thanks for this invitation. I look forward to the next hour.
Kayla, thanks for working with Gerry on this. I just sort of got you connected, and then I backed off and let you do it.
No, that's no problem.
It worked well. She was a pleasure to work with.
Yeah, I appreciate your help in connecting us, Greg.
Welcome.
All right. Well, welcome to the second day of the 2021 Early Learner Forum. We just earlier this morning, we heard from Linda Smith of the Bipartisan Policy Center talking about the business case for childcare, and she gave us some astounding statistics and reasoning for the importance of this field. And then also we heard from Ben Horowitz from the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis. He was talking about their new analysis that they conducted of South Dakota. You will be able to find that on their website where you have access to all of these trainings. That report was actually just published yesterday, so it's hot off the presses. I encourage you guys to look over it. You'll be able to find these recordings also on the website the next day. So all three of our presentations from today, you will be able to find on the website tomorrow. Again, my name is Kayla Klein. I'm the director of Black Hills Reads, a campaign, Black Hills Reads campaign, which is an education initiative under the United Way of the Black Hills umbrella. I'm also the public policy chair for the statewide Early Learner South Dakota initiative and organizer of this event. Again, the vision of Early Learner South Dakota is that all children have access to high quality early learning experiences and environments to create a solid foundation for lifelong success. I would like to introduce our next speaker, our last speaker of the day, Gerry Costa. He is the founding director of the Center for Autism and Early Childhood Mental and a professor of mental health and a professor in the Department of Teaching and Learning at Montclair State University. He was a gubernatorial, I always struggle with that word, appointment to New Jersey Council for Young Children and was the first principal investigator of the New Jersey Autism Center of Excellence, or ACE, coordinating center. He was among the first 16 expert faculty selected by 0 to 3 in the new DC 0 to 5 classification system, and since 2018, he has served as the coordinator of the Northeast Regional Terrorism and Disaster Coalition. In January 2020, he became the principal investigator of the New Jersey Inclusive Education Technical Assistance Project, an $8 million, 5.5-year project advancing full inclusion in New Jersey public schools. He's the past president of the New Jersey Association for the Infant Mental Health. He has conducted presentations and trainings in 28 states and 11 countries, and has received numerous awards, including the 1020, the Aaron Copland Partnership Award, and the New Jersey Association for Musical Therapy. He is a New Jersey licensed psychologist and is an author of articles and book chapter on autism, infant mental health, and formation. I want to thank you so much for being here, and why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Thanks so much, Caitlin. And again, I'd like to thank you, Kayla, and Dr. Greg Boris for inviting me. I've had the privilege in my career to spend a couple of years on a project with Greg and so many other folks we called infant mental health mentors in South Dakota. And I know many of them remain actively connected to the work. So this opportunity to speak to you all about infant and early childhood mental health and about the earliest experiences for me is really very important. So I appreciate this chance. My father-in-law, my late father-in-law would say that, you know, you can't squeeze 10 pounds of bologna into a 5-pound bag. And yet every time I give a presentation like this, I feel like that's what I'm trying to do. But I'm going to try my best to give you a lot of information. It'll be digested and sort of hopefully bulleted in a way that is giving you at least the sense of the breadth of this field and what the implications are, especially as I've come to know and care deeply about the work in South Dakota. I always think we speak in alphabet soup many times in state systems. And so this is a very just cursory glossary of some of the terms I might wind up using or referring to. So whenever you see B3, it's the birth to 3 systems. Early intervention programs are typically the Part C programs that you have in your state and every state. The concept of formation, it's something I've written about and presented about, and I may touch on it, is the word I use for professional development, where we try to really help think about the principal goal of our work in enhancing infant and early childhood mental health and caregiver and teacher support and skills is to help them form as practitioners. And that means helping them to think about knowledge, things to do, ways of knowing, ways of doing, but the most important is ways of being with. It turns out relationships and affective engagement is what really unfolds the human brain and allows the capacity for learning. IECMH is the acronym used for infant and early childhood mental health. When you add a C at the end of it, it refers to consultation based on infant and early childhood mental health. The MIECHV, MIECHV are the home visiting programs funded by mostly federal processes, and South Dakota has many MIECHV programs. The pyramid model is something you may be familiar with. I'll talk to you about it. The P3, many states got the preschool development grant. That's birth to 3, but the P3 is preschool to grade 3. And finally, the quality rating improvement system, the QRIS system. So I hope that is making some sense. So what's our focus today? And it really begins with this observation that the human fetus at 5 months gestation already has over 100 billion nerve cells, neurons. That's about the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy. And the neurosciences have made it clear about what kinds of experiences are needed for children to grow into healthy human beings who are emotionally healthy, able to learn, have brain health, have empathy, and are able to form social connections. And so with that observation, I hope I can discuss what some of the mechanisms are by which infants and young children become able to grow and develop and learn, and what the implications are for optimal development in our state systems. So what do we mean by infant and early childhood mental health? Well, I think many folks probably see that term for the first time, or may see it for the first time, and imagine it's an infant laying on a psychoanalyst's couch talking about their dreams. Well, infant and early childhood mental health is really this interdisciplinary field concerned with the optimal physical, social, emotional, and cognitive development of the human infant and young child within the context of his or her family. The infant and young child is typically principally viewed within a primary relationship, although we know multiple relationships are critical. It takes a village, and there are many individuals who form relationships with babies. But we typically focus on at least some of those clear core relationships, usually the infant-mother relationship, but certainly all the key relationships, infant father, infant caregiver, and so on. And this pair, this unit or dyad, is the principal focus of what we think about when we think about infant and early childhood mental health. But the term infant and early childhood mental health also refers to emotional and psychological capacities. So it means that we hope that infants and young children develop their ability to self-regulate themselves, meaning to calm themselves and maintain an optimal level of arousal and attention, particularly when there are stressors. Stressors are absolutely present in all of our life, and in many ways, the goal of development is to manage stress. This is true for all of us. We hope that infants and young children, by the time they are developing 4 or 5 years of age, can experience and express the full range of human emotions. They are able to demonstrate and engage in loving reciprocal relationships. They begin to be able to use and think about the world in symbols, in thinking and language and ideas. They are able to share their own ideas and emotional experiences with others, and so they engage in relatedness and thinking with others. They care about others, each other, and so the goal of development is not autonomy and separateness or independence, but it's interdependent, the recognition that we are here for each other, and we are social beings. The human brain is a social organ. We hope that they can acquire empathy, the ability to emerge even as complex thinkers, not polarizing, but really engaged in a wide range of complex, gray, reflective thinking. That leads them to really understand and embrace the notion of moral interdependence, even understand notions of justice and equity, and to engage in productive activities in human service. Alfred Adler, one of the renowned psychoanalysts who revised some of Freud's thinking, spoke about the highest level of human function was human service, of giving to others. And so what's our plan based on these insights? Well, our plan is to begin with 4 starting points that I hope you will think about in your work before you in South Dakota. I'd like to even ask you the question, and we won't have a lot of chance to talk about this, but I'll ask you to think about it. as we go through this presentation today and we try to really deliberate about the importance of infants and young children, what is your headline in 5 years? If you, as early learner, South Dakota, could think about what headline you would like to have in major newspapers that describes your state, what would that headline be? Thinking about what that dream is. I have a very brief section, and as you can imagine, all of us teach courses that are 1 semester, 2 semesters long on the infant brain and infant and early childhood mental health. So I'm going to give you my closest to what I call a 15-minute elevator talk. Do you know the elevator talk in cities where there are these tall buildings? You imagine if you had 10 floors to go up, what would you tell somebody if they said, so what do you do with babies? What's infant mental health? And so I would say, I'm going to give you a 50-story little elevator talk. You're going to need 50 stories maybe, but you'll get it in. So I'm going to try to share that with you. I've done some homework and have learned a bit about what's happening in South Dakota with regard to certain national initiatives. So I want to share that with you, and then wonder then what's in the future. So before we begin, I have this remarkable video that I'd like to share with you. So let me just let it speak for itself.
Among the most accomplished and fabled tribes of Africa, no tribe was considered to have warriors more fearsome or more intelligent than the mighty Maasai. It is perhaps surprising then to learn the traditional greeting that passed between Maasai warriors, and how are the children? It is still the traditional greeting among the Maasai, acknowledging the high value that the Maasai always place on their children's well-being. Even warriors with no children of their own would always give the traditional answer, all the children are well, meaning, of course, that peace and safety prevail, that the priorities of protecting the young are in place, that Maasai society has not forgotten its reason for being, its proper functions and responsibilities. All the children are well means that life is good. It means that the daily struggles for existence do not preclude proper caring for their young. I wonder how it might affect our consciousness of our own children's welfare if in our culture we took to greeting each other with this daily question, and how are the children? I wonder if we heard that question and passed it along to each other a dozen times a day, if it would begin to make a difference in the reality of how the children are thought of or cared about in our own country. I wonder if every adult among us, parent and non-parent alike, felt an equal weight for the daily care and protection of all children in our communities, in our towns, in our states, and in our country. And I wonder if we could truly say without hesitation, the children are well. Yes, all the children are well.
I want to share with you that that's available, by the way, on YouTube, How Are the Children? But when I first heard this, it was shared with me by colleagues in Missouri, the Association for Infant Mental Health, where I did a strategic planning process for several years with them. And I was moved by it because I thought it said something so profound and yet so basic about what it is about the work that we have before us. And so in the context of what you have been doing today, right, and this forum, I thought it was something worth sharing. So I want to begin then from that reflection. We're thinking about 4 ideas I wonder if I could share with you and ask you to reflect on with me. I believe that from all that I see and all that I have learned, and having spent so much time in South Dakota with people like Dr. Boris and so many others, I believe that early learner South Dakota has the competencies and gravitas to really lead the state of South Dakota towards becoming a community in which the needs of infants, young children, and their caregivers can be met in every single department, division, office, and system of government, and in the private sector. So it begins with that vision. I think the second thing is that what I have learned in my work in over 25 states, at least 4 states involving strategic planning with states, this is an important effort that often is initiated by people who are infant and early childhood mental health specialists, but it cannot remain in our domain. So South Dakota, like every state, must engage the governor, legislators, and state officials to have what I call skin in the game about infant and early childhood, family, mental health, and learning systems. This means that it cannot be the function only of Early Learner South Dakota to develop strategies and programming, and then request government to be supporters and partners. No, they have to begin from the beginning. They have to be part of it from the beginning. They must, in fact, co-own that planning and programs and the data that they jointly develop, that are developed about the needs, even the failures and the successes. I share this with you with lots of experience where many wonderful initiatives were presented to the government by very intentional, thoughtful professionals. But the government wasn't part of the process from the beginning, and it became interesting information that got bumped out the next time something interesting came along. It must be that they are co-owners. And so Early Learner South Dakota must work to ensure that the state infant and early childhood mental health agenda is guided by a state planning process, discussing the variety of programs throughout state government and private sector in partnership with others, and looking at funding, and simply not looking at nonprofits alone to lead the charge. And I think you'll hear this in almost every strategic discussion about growth of infant and early childhood supports. It must be a public-private partnership. So I believe South Dakota can emerge as a source of information, expertise, data, and information, forgive that duplicate, to promote professional formation, the notion that we can really help train professionals to advocate for policies and practices guided by infant and early childhood mental health. And finally, I think Early Learner South Dakota leaders and members must do as much as you can to become integrated into state government bodies, committees, task forces, advisory boards, seek all opportunities to educate and inform policymakers, legislators, leaders about infant and early childhood mental health. Early in my career, I was known for really hanging out in my state capital, where I would often go to the state capitol for certain meetings, but then be sure that I stopped in to see the commissioner for the Department of Children and Families and let her know about what was happening. And I would go to the lunchroom in the state building and have my lunch and be sure I hung out with anybody I could to get the word out. And I think it's about relationships. So the next slide you might expect from someone from New Jersey. So, and that's it. That is, don't get stuck on the F word. And in this case, the F word is financing, because many times the first thing people will say is, so where's the money? And I think there's a 3-prong approach I want to suggest about how not to get stuck on the F word. The first thing is, I think the task of Early Learner South Dakota and all those advocates is to really increase your knowledge and awareness about infant and early childhood mental health and what can be happening in South Dakota. Now, that can happen in a number of ways, but opportunities to speak at whatever public forum there is, whether it's academic conferences, professional conferences, state meetings, task force membership that's recruited, try to find your way into membership on as many of the state bodies as you can. In our own state, I was appointed by our governor to the Early Learning Advisory Committee called the New Jersey Council for Young Children. But prior to that, probably for 20 years, I served on every imaginable committee that was created by the State Association for Early Child Education for Young Children, by the State Association for Infant Mental Health, for the Coalition for Infant Toddler Educators. Whatever group can sponsor you, get the word out. Another approach is to just get the word out through conferences, public and private meetings at which you can speak, offer to speak at clubs. And I suspect that there are many civic clubs like the, the Elks or the, I'm blocking the business associations and so on. So if you can, whatever you can, try to get the word out and speak. This could really lead to opportunities even to partner on projects. And connect with all others who are doing public awareness efforts in South Dakota. So certainly in terms of your Department of Human Services, Behavioral Health, there's launch projects. You have a number of projects that were funded by SAMHSA in South Dakota that you can be part of, and try to encourage as many of those people to really join together in state and private and state and public and private infant and early childhood mental health partnerships. So in a way, what I'm suggesting to you is you have to first learn the science, know what's out there, know the information, create a vision with others and start planning. And then funding is important to look at. But if you look for funding first, you will always be asked, what would you do with it? Why do we need funding for this? And so the first two questions are important. One of my dear colleagues, Charlie Matisse, who's an organizational guru and worked with me and worked at the university, had this wonderful formula. He called it a change formula. And he said, well, if you look at the state of affairs with regard to infant and early childhood development and early childhood services, infant and early childhood mental health, certainly, there's only what has to happen in order for change to occur, positive change, is number one, change will happen, C, only if, number one, you're dissatisfied, D, with what the current state of affairs is. And also V, if you have a vision for what it should be, and then that vision leads you to create P, a plan. And by the way, all of that, right, the dissatisfaction, the vision, and the plan have to be greater than the cost of change. Now, the reason there's multiplication signs, if you remember this from grammar school, if you multiply anything by zero, the whole formula is zero. So change won't happen if you're dissatisfied alone, but you have no vision or plan, or if you have a vision, but really no one is feeling the need to change it. They're kind of happy with the way things are. Or if you have a plan, a wonderful plan, but people feel neither dissatisfied or have any vision for what it should be instead. And so in some sense, you have to work on all of these to highlight why we need to make change. So one way to think about that, I think, has been, and I'm sure you've seen this before, right? This idea that if you were to imagine South Dakota 5 years from today, and imagine that in 5 years from today, you're part of a nationally renowned program for infant and early childhood mental health in South Dakota. And in fact, South Dakota is viewed as the benchmark for other states that want to understand what you did and how you got there. And you've been asked to write an article for a highly respected journal or newspaper in the field, detailing how you got from where you were to where you are now. What would be the headline of that article? What points would you be sure to include? And again, as part of our strategic planning work in so many states, we've done this headlining activity, and I want you to think about it. And that, by the way, has a lot to do with visioning, right? A lot to do with recognizing the state of affairs the way they are now and what maybe needs to change. So let me give you one of the reasons why what we are doing now may be falling short of the mark. And that's the opportunity that we have with the infant brain and the arrival of an infant. Because not only is it an opportunity for us to really influence the unfolding of a human being, but it actually becomes our obligation to do so. Our failure to provide infants with what they need in order for them to be fully human. If you remember in the beginning of the presentation where I talked about what are the components of infant and early childhood mental health. In order for us to ensure that infants and young children develop these characteristics, we have an opportunity. So I'm going to give you my 15-minute illustration. I told you the 50-story skyscraper that you'll go in the elevator with someone, and in 15 minutes you'll tell them why it's important to take care of babies and what we must need to do. And so I'm going to give you kind of 2 facts and then just share 4 quick moments in the life of an infant and their family. So the first 2 facts are something called, the first fact I shared with you, saying that the infant brain has 100 billion nerve cells in the 5-month fetus, 5 months gestation. And by the way, just to come back to this slide or show you this slide, and I'll return to the prior one. Not only does the infant brain have these 100 billion nerve cells, but at birth, only 20% of these brain cells are connected with each other based on genetic signaling, genetic messaging, and the nature of intrauterine life. A full 80% of what we become in terms of our unique qualities and characteristics and capabilities are formed following birth and are formed through the nature of interpersonal processes. The brain is a relational organ, and it is formed through a back and forth relationship process. Each of those 100 billion neurons, and this is a remarkable understanding, each of those 100 billion neurons can form up to 10,000 connections with other nerve cells in your brain. And those connections per neuron, per nerve cell, can occur at 700 a second, 1 million a second brain-wide. And in the first year of life, connections are formed more quickly than they are lost, pruned. So what does this say to us? It says to us that our brain from the first moment of arrival is actually being biologized, is being wired by the nature of interpersonal experiences. By the way, we never knew this 30 years ago. We thought that we could leave babies in cribs. We didn't need to stimulate them or hold them or talk with them. We believed we could move an infant from home to home to home in order to keep them safe and protect them. But what we didn't know is what gardeners know, that you never transplant a plant unless you take the soil around it. The soil for babies are relationships. And so these numbers have told us now that we have really done poorly by babies and by young children by not recognizing the neuroscience. The second fact I mentioned to you is something called secondary altriciality. Now, I know that's a technical term, but I really think it's an important term. It's probably the term that for me has been the game changer whenever I've spoken to people. And secondary altriciality means human infants are altricial. Human infants at birth depend on others. Altricial means they must be cared for by others. The newborn of many large mammals, horse, cattle, giraffe, elephant, are typically able to stand and begin to graze and seek food and even search for the maternal nipple for food and milk soon after birth. But human infants have an extended infancy, a secondary infancy or a secondary womb. So secondary altriciality means they require this second womb, but this time the womb is not a physical one. It's a psychological one, a social one, interpersonal one. And again, we have learned from the neurosciences the kinds of relationships that babies need in order for them to thrive. And by the way, please understand, this is not just nice talk. Oh, aren't babies cute? Don't you love to hold them? It is essential for our human ability to grow and develop and to become regulated and engage and communicate and think. So the secondary altriciality, the brain has 100 billion by 5 months gestation, and babies need a second womb, at least for 1 to 2 years after birth. And so my daughter, who's an occupational therapist, heard me speak many years ago. And this is what I said in my presentation. If I had a bumper sticker, it would say, in the beginning, there was the relationship. And I'm so grateful that she had this made for me a couple of years ago. So I'm going to share with you four quick moments. And this is, again, the stuff that I know, given our limited time, I'm hoping I can leave you with some of these powerful images. So the first thing I want to show you is a baby waking up, just that moment and what happens to that baby and his caregiver. The second, I'm going to show you a dad sneezing with these two twins, and you'll be amazed at what babies can do very early on, forgive me. The third I'll show you is a brief clip of a mother singing to a baby. And it's a very disturbing and lovely at the same time, a video. And then finally, I'm going to talk to you about the Jack in the Box. And again, I wish I could spend more time with you. So let's do the first clip. Or not. I'm sorry, this should work. Kayla, don't you hate when this doesn't happen? I'm gonna.
Yeah, you're just fine. And if anything, you could, if you want to send me the link or put the link in the chat, I can.
I can. All right. Let me see if I can get it. If not, I may have to just do without. I can't believe it. All right. I'm gonna have to go to the father sneezing. Let's see if this works. Well, folks, this is where, the best laid plans. Well, I wish I could tell you, but these two twins, these brothers, are playing with each other, and off camera, their dad starts sneezing. So they look up at him, and then this one goes, starts sneezing. And then his brother laughs, and his brother then goes, and then they laugh at each other. Then this one starts sneezing and that one starts sneezing. And it became so clear that their ability to observe and imitate is so incredibly present at this young age. So I'm sorry about that, but I'm going to try, and I hope this works, because this is a remarkable one of a mom singing to a baby. And I have a feeling that none of these are going to work, and for reasons that are not clear to me. Well, forgive me. I really apologize for this. So what I'm going to have to do is try to rely on my big moment. And this one I actually tried earlier, so this should work. And so what I wanted to do, let me just be sure. Yeah, all right, good. So that works, thankfully. So what I wanted to do is talk about the Jack in the Box moment. Now, by the way, I have come to spend a lot of time thinking about a Jack in the Box moment. And for many of you who think, well, that's what you PhDs do. You get your degrees and you think about these small little moments. I want to try to unpack with you the power of what happens in this little moment where a child is confronted with something that's frightening. By the way, whoever thought that Jack in the Box was fun? Right? When you first see it for the first time, and this little baby I'll show you, little Dane, is about 7 months. Dane had seen it once before, a little bit before the video that's taken, and you'll see what happens. But what I want you to look at, and what I'll unpack for you, is really what happens when Dane is confronted with this frightening moment. What does he need from his world and relationships in order for him to make sense of this moment of stress? And how does he know eventually that this is part of an okay thing? How does he know that when stress happens, he can recover? So take a look at this first and I'll unpack it with you.
Okay, here we go. Ready?
Look at him.
What's wrong, big guy? Oh, it's just
Now, I wish I could see all of you, and I just slid my screen to see your faces, but many of you don't have your camera on. But if I did see you, I think I would see you making this empathy face. Oh, or your lip was curled just like the baby's lip was curled. So I want to unpack this for you. So let's spend a moment, right, with little Dane and sort of figure this out. So take a look at Dane right here. He had just seen this once before, this Jack in the Box, right? Already as his mother starts cranking the toy, his eyes widen because already he's anticipate what it felt like earlier, surprise and fear. Already after one instance, his brain remembers that this is frightening. And his brain, if we could measure the changes in his heart rate and blood pressure, his brain is already pumping signals to get ready with fight or flight or freeze response, right? So look at that. And then what happens as his mother turns the crank and the familiar music begins to play, right? He does what we have to do and must do throughout his whole life. He looks at his mother. He needs to look at his mother or in the future, other people for a clue about the meaning of what this moment is about. He's wary, his lip is curling, if you can see, and it will soon become a cry as he waits, right? Suddenly the lid noisily pops and opens up. The Jack appears, springing up quickly and without warning. Dane is overwhelmed. What is this? Mommy, what does this mean? Am I safe? Will you help me feel safe? I'm frightened and I feel alone. Dane again looks at his mother, a response that you will see in the future is a biological and neurological imperative for meaning. More so, he needs to be comforted and regulated. He can't do it alone right there. Secondary altriciality. So his mom, in a warm, lilting voice, with some laughter, but always attuned to his sadness, she sees Dane as upset and worried and frightened. She quickly picks him up to comfort him. And she begins to show him that together they will get through this frightening moment. Now, what would happen had Dane not had someone to make some sense of that moment? And by the way, there are millions of moments that happen in the life of an infant and young child that really require that babies be attuned to, felt with, co-regulated, calmed, and felt with. There's a remarkable science about what babies need to be regulated and calm and alert in order for them to learn and grow and to form relationships. And in a very brief way, I'll try to tell you what's happening in his brain is going to give us the key as to why this is all important. So in a way, if you look at this graphic, you may not realize this, but between a parent and a child, between an adult and a child, between adults and adults, really, there are a series of back and forth gestures, hand movements, eye contact, vocal expressions, words that actually change brains for each other. A mother's brain can change her baby's brain. If the baby is frightened, a soft voice from the mother and a warm, lilting smile can help the baby. But suppose the parent is distracted, is suffering from mental health illness concerns, is substance abusing, and the mother is not available to help the baby in that moment. What happens to that moment of stress and difficulty? What happens, in fact, if the parent, even more disturbingly, takes some pleasure in the baby being frightened and teases him and maybe makes him frightened even more? And again, I please understand, I'm not sharing that as a judgment, but as a reminder that if we don't help parents in their growing up, they can become parents who can sometimes be frightening to the children themselves. So we know that this kind of back and forth is happening all the time. And so when Dane is upset, right, inside his brain, his head is his brain, and inside his mother's head is her brain, reacting, responding, remembering, wondering. And so Dane and his mother continue to form each other's brain, but the mother has the greater responsibility. But Dane, again, has his own power. And speaking of skin in the game, he has skin in the game. He has to somehow try to help himself do that. So the two notions, right? This idea that the brain has 100 billion neurons at 5 months gestation and that they require response of others. And the idea that infancy from birth, from pregnancy through the first 2 to 3 years of life requires much more attention really is where we are in the state of affairs. We have learned so much from our neurosciences about the kinds of relationships that babies need in order for them, again, to be regulated, engage, communicate, and learn. So what I wanted to do was give you a brief overview of some of the things that are occurring nationally about infant and early childhood work. It includes both mental health and infant and early childhood child care and education as well, that I'd like you to be aware of and sort of see where South Dakota might really pursue some opportunities. One of the broadest national movements in order to enhance the quality of good care, child care and education, infant, toddler, preschool education, is a movement called the Quality Rating Improvement Systems, the QRIS systems in early care and education. 49 states have a QRIS system in some form of development. As of 2019, there were 44 that were fully operational. Others were beginning to come online. The first QRIS system, and this is a rating system established by the state that provides opportunities to carefully look at the child care community and ask them or set standards for them to really reach high quality care and education. So the rise in the past 8 years is actually because so many federal initiatives allowed states to really move in that direction. The Race to the Top, which started back in 2011, really included participation in quality rating improvement systems as a requirement, as a performance metric. So as best as I can determine, and I looked at South Dakota 2 years ago as well, South Dakota's QRIS system remains in the planning stages. And so you can see that this is a map that was developed by a national initiative called the BUILD Initiative. I think one of your speakers, in fact, is a member of the fellow. She did a fellowship with the BUILD Initiative. You can see that for the most part, those that are in blue are statewide systems. Those that are red are either counties or localities and regions in that state. The green ones, they're just piloting. The one purple one does not have a QRIS, and I think it's five yellow gold ones are in the planning stages. This is a critical initiative, and in my own state, when this began about 8 or 9 years ago, partly seeded by the Early Learning Advisory Council, the Governor's Council, and partly supported by the Race to the Top funding. It's called Grow NJ Kids. It's just led to this remarkable enhancement of opportunities. The center that I head at Montclair State University, a state university, provides support for centers that are working to enhance their rating in the quality rating improvement system. In our state, it's a STAR system. 1, 2, 3, or 4 stars. And the higher stars that you get, you actually get a higher rate of reimbursement from the reimbursement system in our state, the subsidy system. So the QRIS establishes, and what's great about the QRIS is when there's a participatory membership from many forces, many sectors of South Dakota, the standards themselves are customized to the things that you and your state realize are critical important. I really apologize for delivering this message, but as I did some homework, the McCormick Center you may be familiar with, it's a national center, as well as the L.E.A.D, Early Childhood Clearinghouse, in 2017 published a landscape view, and they said South Dakota lacks key components: the administrative credential, statewide QRIS, and statewide pre-K programs for supporting, as well as a well-qualified early childhood leadership workforce. Now, again, I wondered if it was appropriate for me to share this slide, but I am here because I hope that you can regard me as someone who cares deeply about the work in South Dakota. And more than anything, I think we know there are opportunities, and I wanted you to be as aware as possible of what the QRIS systems are. There are some SAMHSA, Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. Several years ago, there was a national RFP looking for people, looking for states and organizations to develop programs and proposals to establish behavioral health care that focused on age birth to 5, 0 to 5. And one of the national projects that was awarded was at the Southeastern Behavioral Health Care Center. And so it's a remarkable opportunity to tap into those people there as well, to really engage them in some statewide efforts. SAMHSA has each year, they call them either RFAs, request for applications, or FORs, funding opportunity requests. They go by different names: RFPs, requests for proposals. But having your state leaders look at SAMHSA opportunities is a remarkable thing to do. You may be familiar with the pyramid model. The pyramid model is a national model that began about 20 years ago through state funding, federal funding, forgive me, and it was known at the time at Vanderbilt University as the Center for the Social and Emotional Foundations of Early Learning, CEFL. And the pyramid model is a statewide model in a large number of states, and many states are growing. So you can see here that the yellow states are all what are called CEFL states. The blue states are what's called taxi states. That's the Technical Assistance Center for Special Education and Intervention. It's a similar thing, but the CEFL and the taxi states are all part of the pyramid model. And then there are other pyramid model initiatives occurring in those green states. And so again, this is an opportunity for you, and I have the pyramid model website there. And I had shared with Kayla and Greg that if there are any of these programs that you begin to become interested in, I would be happy to provide you with linkages on how to learn more about them. The MIECHV programs, this has become a major investment by the federal government for the past, I'd say, 11, 12 years to fund home visitation programs. On the right side of this slide, there are 4 nationally known evidence-based programs: Healthy Families America, the Nurse Family Partnership, Parents as Teachers, PAT, and something called HIPPY. HIPPY is not that common in the United States, but HIPPY, that's, forgive me, it's a preschool preparation. I can't remember the home instruction for preschool preparation, and I can't remember what the Y stands for. Now, you probably have, and I'm looking at you, Kayla, I don't know if you, but do you know if there are many MIECHV programs in South Dakota home visitation? I suspect there are.
That is unfortunately not something I know. I
No,
wondered,
sure.
yeah, Yep, go ahead, Jody.
Yeah, it's through the Department of Health.
Good,
And
good.
so they do. It's called Bright Start.
Great, great. And
Yeah.
Jody, the opportunities are continuing to grow. Now, COVID has changed our worlds tremendously. It's almost unfortunate I didn't talk about COVID at the start of our presentation, because it's changed the world and certainly changed opportunities for home visiting and funding. But these are remarkable opportunities, and the common elements of these evidence-based home visitation programs are listed. But one of the most critical insights is 100 billion neurons at 5 months gestation, secondary electricity, the relationships needed from the beginning, home visitation programs, especially ones like nurse-family partnership, which engage families prior to, I think, 18 months pregnancy and stay with them for the first 2 to 3 years of life. These are game changers. These are opportunities, and there's increasing conversations nationally about a broader, more universal kind of home visitation, even if it's brief following the birth of a child. So these are opportunities. The last one I wanted to talk with you about is something called the Alliance for the Advancement of Infant Mental Health. And it's a global organization that was begun in Michigan based on work started by the Michigan Association for Infant Mental Health. And they created a set of guidelines, competency guidelines, that qualify people at 4 different levels to be specialists in infant and early childhood mental health. They have an infant mental health endorsement. If you look at my initials after my name, I'm endorsed at the highest level of clinical mentor, but they also are developing an early childhood 3 to 5 year old. There are many states, I think over 31 states in 3 countries, that have embraced this endorsement. The state of Missouri, which I've been working with for about 4 years, I just was on a call with them the other day, and they are finally announcing that they are contracting with the Alliance for the Advancement of Infant Mental Health. It creates a professional formation and certification program, so people get a certificate indicating they have been well trained in this field. And it's wonderful, by the way, for hiring practices. For judicial work, I haven't talked at all about the judicial leadership that's happening, called baby courts. That's happening as well with infant mental health principles. So the Alliance, as I mentioned, is in a number of states as well. All the green states, including, I think there's 2 countries too, Western Australia and Ireland as well. These are the opportunities that exist, and they're worth pursuing. So what does this all mean, really? I think what it means is there are lots of national initiatives. I didn't touch on the infant and early childhood mental health consultation work. There's a national center for infant and early childhood mental health in Georgetown University that is establishing programs throughout the nation. There are many opportunities to really provide South Dakota with a lot of resources, but it does take a bunch of champions. It takes a small group of people. I'm always remembered that Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, would say, don't ever think that a small group of people can't make a difference. In fact, it's typically been that major changes in our lives have occurred because of the leadership of a small group of people. And so, find out what's happening in your state government, and find out who's responsible in your departments for responding to the funding opportunity announcements that I've mentioned from a variety of federal sources. Get involved with those units. And as I said to you, in a way that really underlies the critical importance of relationships, get to know the people in your state government and travel to visit them. I know Pierre's a hike, depending on where you are. And I've spent a lot of time in Pierre. And what I remember most is that there's a bridge that goes over to the next time zone. So what I've been told by people is that it's wonderful for taxis and for bars. So I hope you don't use it for bars, but the idea that Pierre is a hot spot to go, but to spend time with your state capital, and make South Dakota a leader in organizing professional development and service delivery. So how do you do this, right? You need to know the key stakeholders in infant and early childhood mental health. For me, I think a small group of core change agents, that's you, the passionate advocates. Certainly you have to partner with university partners, and Dr. Boris is an example of that. Create and work with development and develop professional training centers in infant and early childhood work. Your state early childhood education authority, your public mental health authority, state professional licensing boards. We have been trying to work with our licensure in our Medicaid office. We have been working in our Medicaid office in New Jersey to have them accept a new standard, a new classification system for infants and young children. But there are many programs, including early periodic screening, detection, and treatment, EPSDT, which allows for infant mental health screening and is funded under Medicaid. So working on that. Get the champions and leaders to work together. By the way, evidence is critical, having support from evidence. But I have found over the course of my career that sometimes powerful stories for legislators, for those who are influence makers, tell a powerful story, have a family or a parent tell their story about how something helped or changed them. And that really can start the difference. I actually have spoken a couple of times about the idea of, in South Dakota, helping to form a South Dakota Association for Infant Mental Health. It will really gather and galvanize professionals, and that can be done with the Alliance for the Advancement. That may be happening now. I'm looking at Kayla and she's smiling a bit, so I don't know if that's just a wish or maybe it's happening. I don't know, but I hope it can. Think globally, work locally. That was the old line, right? Do what you can, build a large vision, but start with some programs in your state. And always, I don't think you need someone like me to say, but imagine that headline in 5 years. What do you want to be? What do you want to see happen? And make that the goal that you work towards. Dr. Walter Gilliam is a famous scientist at Yale University, and he is the groundbreaker who demonstrated back in 2005 that preschool children were being expelled at a higher rate than K-12, and that's still happening, by the way. And he said to me, you know, I was telling legislators how important infant and early childhood mental health consultation was, but they glazed over, their eyes glazed over. And he said, I realized that I was telling them the problem, but I wasn't giving them, I was telling the solution, but they didn't buy into the problem. And so what he did is he kept talking about infant and early childhood mental health consultation, but instead he showed them the problem. When he told them that preschoolers were expelled at higher rates than K-12, they opened up their eyes. When he did research about implicit bias, showing that teachers were expecting misbehavior from Black children, Black boys and white boys mostly, he began to see their eyes change. So in a sense, you may be passionate about some solutions, but you have to demonstrate the problems. One way I've done this for years is looking at child maltreatment data. Now, this is the data for the nation and for South Dakota. So nationally, you can see here, if you look at the age of victim, this is 2018, the largest proportion of children who are abused are under the age of 1. And in South Dakota, by the way, 35% under age 3 are abused nationally. In South Dakota, that was 41% of your children under, 41% represented children under age 1. Children under age 1 with the highest victimized rate, 15.2%. Forgive me, the first bullet was under 3, the second bullet under 1. So nationally, it was 15.2% of all victims are under 1. In South Dakota, it was 16.2. There were 1,485 child fatalities in 2008. And just to compare that, by the way, 106 police officers and 15 soldiers in Afghanistan died that year, but 1,485 children died. And children less than 1 died from abuse at 3.6 times the rate of children who were 1 year old. So show them the problem. And you have to answer this question. Samuel Meisels, Dr. Meisels is from the Erickson Institute. And he said, people you talk to are going to say these 2 things. So what? Who cares? And we have to answer, here's why, and we care. So how are the children, right? That's the question. How are the children, especially in South Dakota? So I wanted to show you this 2-minute clip, but Kayla, I know I'm at time. So do you think I might be able to try it, or do you think it's respectfully good to stop now?
You know, I warned everyone in the chat that, sorry, this is all riveting to me, and I know I could sit here for another 15, 20 minutes and listen to you go on. So I'd say let's play it. I understand if people need to leave.
And it's 2 minutes. It's literally.
But it's going to be recorded too. If anyone does need to leave, you can always come back. But yeah, let's do it.
So this is believe it or not, a Canadian comedian named Michael Jr. And he videotaped his own daughter soon after birth. And he shows something in this videotape that illustrates the secondary altriciality, indicates how we are so responsive to other humans. And if we don't have that focus, it's to our peril. It is. So I want you to look at this.
Yo, comedian Michael Jr. here. As you know, I just flat out enjoy doing comedy. But one of the things I love way more than that is being a dad. Not too long ago, I'm going through some video footage and I run into this video of my youngest daughter being born. Now, of course, I was there. I actually took the video, but I had never really experienced it from this perspective before. Now look, we're in a hospital room. She's sticky and she's baby and all that stuff, and she's in the middle of crying. And then I speak up. I start talking to her, and watch how she responds when she hears my voice.
It's okay, Portland. Look, I'm right here. It's okay. It's okay. I'm right here. I'm right here. We're doing just fine. It's okay. It's okay. I'm right here. Right here. Yeah. It's okay. It's okay, baby. It's okay.
That was pretty awesome. So check it. A few minutes later, the nurse starts working on her, puts her pamper on her, and I'm not saying anything, and she actually starts to cry again. Then I speak up, she hears my voice, and stops crying, like again. But I want you to notice what else happens after I tell her that I love her.
Mom hold you. Portland, it's okay. It's okay. It's good. It's good. It's good. I'm right here. I'm right here. I am right here. I love you. I love you. I love you. Yeah, I'm right here. I'm right here. It's okay. It's okay.
That's just phenomenal. I'm like, whoa. Here's the thing. We'll always have times where we're not as comfortable, probably even to the point of tears, where life is just heavy. The key thing to do in those moments is to be still and listen for the Father's voice, because He is trying to talk to you. And I can tell you what He wants you to know is that He loves you. All you got to do is open your eyes. Happy Father's Day.
So Michael Jr., by the way, developed that partly out of a Father's Day thing, but also he added clearly a spiritual message. and those are wonderful themes, but the reason I wanted to show it to you is that it indicates a neurobiological predisposition that we have as part of our equipment, and babies have. But when that capacity to respond to others is not honored, that capacity can weaken, and babies suffer as a result of not being felt with. So it's a lot to think about. I just want to remind you that, at the end of it all, I always love this picture that I always think babies are watching us all the time. They're looking at us. They're wondering if we're going to do right by them. If when they go to infant toddler centers, if people are looking at them with care and thought and understanding. Preschool, certainly to us as parents. So, this was a very, very brief excursion into why we really have to pay attention to infant and early childhood space. And hopefully, as you in South Dakota continue to do wonderful things, you'll hopefully be thinking about some of the things that we covered today. So I'd like to wrap up. And again, thank you so much for this time. And thanks again to Greg and Kayla for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time being here. Folks, remember, if you do have some questions about the presentation, we can sure get those questions to Dr. Costa. Thank you all for hanging in there a little later. I think that was a really important message for us to hear on an end note. So enjoy the rest of your day. I just want to remind everyone that we are going to have our next session starting tomorrow, 10:30 Mountain Time, 11:30 Central Time, Advocacy 101. We hope to see you then, and have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Take care. Bye.